Howdy folks, and welcome to the Armoured Warfare second focus test, much bigger in scope than the first focus test, featuring 22 different vehicles to choose from, progression from Tier 1 up to Tier 5, introducing the arms dealer system, the commander and the crew development system. There's a hell of a lot more going on in the second focus test than there was in the first. Oh, and did I mention 2 new maps as well? There was no artillery available for play in the second focus test. Artillery has been temporarily removed from the game while they completely rework the way artillery works based on feedback from the first focus test and the survey on artillery that they conducted immediately after that. So, no artillery in any of these games. What we do have are lots of armoured fighting vehicles, the scouts of Armoured Warfare, a couple of light tanks, 1 tank destroyer, and lots of main battle tanks, like this sexy beast here, the Mark V Chieftain. And if you're any kind of man, you're probably sitting there right now thinking to yourself, how do I get my hands on that monster of a tank? And that's as good a reason as any to show you how the progression system is going to work in Armoured Warfare. The Mark V Chieftain is one of the Tier 5 main battle tanks available in the second focus test of Armoured Warfare, so obviously in order to get there you first have to play Tier 1, 2, 3 and 4 vehicles, but the actual process of unlocking the vehicles works in a way that's completely different to what you may be expecting. Unlocking and progressing through vehicles in Armoured Warfare is done via the arms dealer system, and in the focus test 2 arms dealers were unlocked with various different merchandise available for purchase. We started off with 2 different armoured fighting vehicles available in our garage, the PT-76, which you can see here, of Soviet design, and the Western LAV-150. Both of your starter vehicles, of course, are fresh out of the box, so we're going to jump in and start applying some upgrades to them. And not all vehicles have the same upgrades. Some vehicles have systems that other vehicles don't have. So let's pop into the upgrade section and have a look at what we can see. So this is the upgrade screen for the LAV-150, and all of the vehicles in the game have the same 4 basic areas of upgrades. You've got armour, firepower, mobility and technology. And not all vehicles in the game actually have upgrades in all 4 of the different categories. As you can see, the LAV-150 does not have any armour upgrades. 7mm of armour is all you get on this thing, but it does have a technology upgrade, an electric turret drive which increases the turret rotation speed by 10%. We can also replace our default petrol engine with a more powerful diesel engine, which gives us more engine power and increases our acceleration. Then there are various different ammunition unlocks for the 20mm autocannon, and we can replace the 20mm autocannon completely with an upgraded 25mm autocannon. Now note, there's an orange bar at the top of the screen that as I unlock all of these different systems, this orange bar keeps filling up. This is the amount of reputation that we have invested into this vehicle. And as that bar at the top of the screen fills up, as you unlock various different modules, you can see from the tooltip that pops up when you mouse over that only 50% of the modules on this vehicle need to be unlocked in order to open up access to the next tier of vehicles. But since we're here anyway, and we've got the reputation to spare, we'll just finish unlocking everything on the LAV-150, and then we'll see where we go from here. And there you go, one fully upgraded vehicle. Oh, hang on, I haven't actually installed the 25mm cannon. And you can see that the visual representation of the vehicle in the background does change as you unlock and install new systems. So with the LAV-150 fully upgraded, where do we go from here? Well, you go to the dealer screen. 2 dealers available in the second focus test. Wolfie here is the dealer who supplied us with the LAV-150, and you can see that there are 3 distinct blocks of vehicle upgrades that you can access from here, and each of the different blocks have different unlock criteria. Obviously, in the focus test these are just placeholder requirements, but they can give you some sort of idea of what you can expect to see when the game goes into final release. For the central block here, the main block with the Scorpion, the Leopard, the Swingfire and the OF-40 main battle tank, all you have to do to unlock access to this block of vehicles is fight 3 battles in any of Wolfie's vehicles. For the block on the left, beginning with the M113 leading onto the T72, the basic block unlock prerequisites are exactly the same. Fight 3 battles in any of Wolfie's vehicles. For the block on the far right, it's slightly more complicated. You have to achieve a certain amount of damage done using Sophie's vehicles at ranges in excess of 300 meters. So before we actually go and unlock access to these various different vehicle blocks by playing some more games in the LAV-150, let's have a look at the other weapons dealer, Marat Shishkin, and you can see the kind of vehicles that he also has available. Again, split into 3 distinct blocks, and the prerequisites for unlocking access to these blocks are by and large the same. Certainly for the central block, it's just play 3 games in Marat's vehicles, but for the block on the right, you can see that to unlock access to these advanced armoured fighting vehicles like the VBL and the Weasel, you have to do a certain amount of damage while on the move in Marat's vehicles. By contrast, if you were to have a look at the main battle tank block over there on the far left, in order to unlock these vehicles, you have to do a certain amount of damage while driving Marat's vehicles at ranges closer than 150 meters. Once again, it's worth mentioning that since this is just a focus test alpha version of the game, the various different requirements to unlock these vehicle blocks are very, very likely to just be placeholders at the moment, but they can give you at least a basic idea of the sort of thing that you can expect to see and to have to do to unlock the vehicles when it does reach final release. So that's enough messing around in the garage for now. Let's go and unlock some vehicles. Now, of the 2 starter vehicles, the PT-76, which I'm driving here, which, as you can see, as it has a 76mm gun, is perfectly capable of penetrating the terrible armour of a main battle tank like the Leopard 1. But because there's no matchmaking going on, and the PT-76 does have a 76mm gun, I found it a hell of a lot easier to drive and get results with, and oops, VBL there just reversed right into the Leopard, got himself crushed, and awarded a team kill to the Leopard driver. Not his fault, of course. This was one of the known issues, by the way, from the second focus test. The collision damage was out of control. That's a known issue, it's being looked at. The tank nerds amongst you may have also noticed something not quite right with the suspension on that Leopard as well. That's another one of the known issues from the second focus test. The modelling of the Leopard wasn't quite right. But since there is no matchmaking going on in the focus test, the matchmaking is way at the bottom of the list of priorities this early in development. They're mostly focusing on just making sure that the actual vehicle mechanics are in place. And so it was entirely possible for a rank 1 vehicle like this to get into a rank 4 battle like this, or even a rank 5 battle. The matchmaker was literally just grabbing people from the pool of available players regardless of what tier of vehicles they were driving. So driving something like the PT-76 that has a relatively meaty 76mm gun meant that I was actually able to get some damage done and progress up to tier 2 relatively quickly in this block of vehicles. That doesn't mean, of course, that it was impossible to do the same in the LAV-150. You just have to do it in a different way. The PT-76, because it has some armour and it has a relatively meaty 76mm gun with some decent armour-piercing ammunition, you can, certainly in low-tier games, play it kind of like a main battle tank. You can't do that with the LAV-150. 7mm of armour, 25mm pop gun, even fully upgraded, but it is very quick, it's very stealthy, and it has a very, very good view range. In a tier 4 game like this, you have to play it as the eyes and ears of your team, you have to be a scout. One other thing to take note of, however, is that armoured fighting vehicles capture bases twice as quickly as anybody else. So getting to the enemy base is actually quite easy in the LAV-150 if you wait until mid-game, but actually surviving when you're in there is a different matter entirely. That is a tier 5 armoured fighting vehicle, the Weasel 1. So I'm going to use some, well, there isn't an awful lot of concealment here, but I can attempt to use these containers. And I'm actually trying to turn this tank around, but it isn't a tank, is it? It's a wheeled vehicle, so it won't rotate on the spot like a tank will. You actually have to apply some forward motion in order to get the thing to turn. And it's around about this point where I found out that, yep, there it is, anti-tank guided missile. And it misses. And the Weasel driver's cursing, and of course he fired and gave his position away, and I've got him! Yay! I killed a tier 5 in my tier 1, yeah! I don't fancy my chances against the enemy N60, however, so I'm backing up into some slightly more solid concealment here. Of course, now if the enemy team wants to win, they have to kill me, and that's forced them to abandon their positions and rush the base in an attempt to reset the cap and kill me. But we have a friendly T-64, a couple of hundred metres south of me, in a perfect position to block them. And the rest of the team, of course, are shooting them up as they're in the open, and we did win this one by capping. So, Tier 1 LAV 150 in a Tier 5 match, I did the grand total of 86 damage, which is terrible, which is 86 more damage than I thought I was going to do going into this kind of match, and yet still managed to finish top of the team on reputation earned. So, we've played a couple of games in our PT-76 and our LAV 150. We've unlocked access to the main blocks of vehicles available from our two different weapon dealers. And that allows us to go into battle in a Tier 2 vehicle like the FV-101 Scorpion. This is equipped with a low-velocity 76mm gun. It's kind of like firing a howitzer in World of Tanks. You do have to give your target substantial lead time if they're moving. The ammunition choices for that 76mm gun are, well, they're not quite as straightforward as you might first think. If you look at the basic damage and penetration values for the ammunition listed, and the choice of ammunition on the Scorpion is various different flavours of high explosive, and then HESH, high explosive squash head. Those of us who played World of Tanks will know HESH as basically being high explosive ammunition that has much better penetration. Well, that's not really the case here in Armoured Warfare. The HESH actually has lower penetration than the best high explosive ammunition available. So at first glance you'd be thinking, well, what the heck is the point in doing anything other than loading high explosive? But it's not as simple as that in Armoured Warfare, because Armoured Warfare has vehicles that don't just have homogeneous steel armour plating. You have vehicles with explosive reactive armour, you have vehicles with composite armour, you have vehicles with different combinations of different types of armour. And the game also models the different effects that different kinds of ammunition have on different kinds of armour. So just looking at the raw penetration numbers of your ammunition isn't telling you the whole story. High explosive anti-tank ammunition tends to have better penetration values than armour-piercing, thin-stabilised, discarding Sabo ammunition of the same calibre, but only an idiot would fire high explosive anti-tank ammunition at a tank that's protected with explosive reactive armour, because explosive reactive armour is specifically designed to defeat ammunition like high explosive anti-tank. Firing armour-piercing, even though it doesn't have as high a raw penetration value, is always better in that particular circumstance. So it's a little bit more complicated than just fire high explosive at thinly armoured targets and fire armour piercing and everything else. Of course, if you're in a Leopard shooting at a Scorpion, it doesn't really matter what you're firing. Oh well. So we've unlocked access to various different tank blocks within the dealer subsystem, and once we have unlocked access to a block, all that it takes to unlock further vehicles within that block is spending the influence or experience that you've earned in upgrading those vehicles to at least the 50% mark, which will then unlock the next vehicle in the tier. So I'm currently spending my influence on the AMX-10P, which is a Tier 2 armoured fighting vehicle, and leads directly to the M60 Patton, which is a Tier 3 main battle tank. I'm almost there, I've almost reached the 50% mark, unlock the engine, and bingo, that's pushed it well over 50%, which now allows me to research and purchase the M60 Patton. And that, pretty much in a nutshell, is how you go about upgrading vehicles in Armoured Warfare and progressing onto the next vehicle within the same block. Now we're going to take a look at the crew, and when we say the crew, I actually mean the commander and the crew, because they're treated separately. I'd like you to meet Victor. Victor is the commander of all of the tanks that I have bought from Marat Shishkin. He's completely separate from the crew, unless he's actually in the same tank as them. Currently, he's the commander of my Mark V Chieftain. The crew of the Chieftain, the driver, the loader, and the gunner, stay in the Chieftain, but the commander commands whichever tank you have selected from that weapons dealer. So at the moment I'm upgrading Victor's skills. I've played a couple of battles with Victor, he's gained a couple of levels, and I've got some skill points to distribute. Now the skills over here on the right, it's a case of either or. As you can see, as I go down each line, I've got a choice of two skills. I have to choose between them. I can't have them both. If I pick one, the other one becomes unavailable. Over to the left, next to his portrait, you can see Victor's stats: dependency, leadership, determination, and perception. I haven't actually distributed any of the skill points in those yet, but I'll get onto that in a moment. Now, Victor is a basic tank commander. That's a good thing and it's a bad thing. Because he's a basic level tank commander, it means he can command any of the vehicles that I have purchased from one particular weapons dealer. But that does mean that he's not especially good at any one type of vehicle. Later on, possibly in the next focus test, we'll see more advanced tank commanders, where they are tied to more specific types of vehicles. You may have a tank commander who is only able to command main battle tanks, but he gets much better main battle tank specific skills than a basic tank commander like Victor here. Of course, the advantage is Victor can command any kind of tank. And just to round things up, we'll have a look at the various different crew members. Now remember, the crews stay on the specific vehicles. It's only the commander that moves from vehicle to vehicle. As you can see, I haven't actually played that many games in my Chieftain yet, so I don't have any of the crew skill unlocks. But you can see the sort of thing that you get. If we switch around to other vehicles, and you can see the difference based on the experience level of the crew. You can see the difference in the various different crew skills that they have: acceleration, traverse speed, terrain resistance, that sort of thing. Obviously, the more games you've played in a vehicle and the more influence or experience that you've earned in a vehicle, then the better the crew are going to be. But even if you have a complete rookie crew, you can always give them a buff to their stats by giving them a very highly experienced commander. If you invest points in the commander's leadership stat, then that directly affects the crew skills of the vehicle which he commands. I think I managed to get Victor's leadership up to something like 66, which buffed the stats of the crews that he was performing by anything up to 19%, so it's quite a powerful modifier. So we've looked at the arms dealer system, we've looked at unlocking various different blocks of vehicles within the arms dealer system, we've looked at unlocking modules on your tanks and progressing to the next tank in the tier from the tank that you're upgrading. We've looked at the commander, we've looked at the crew systems, and right now you've looked at me stocking up my Chieftain for its first battle. Shall we blow some stuff up now? Yeah, let's do that. So, Jingles, what's your favourite tank so far in Armoured Warfare? Don't ask stupid questions. Look at it. It's the Chieftain. This thing is amazing. I've played all of the Tier 5 main battle tanks, and there's nothing wrong with any of them. The M60E3 is a good tank, especially once you unlock the explosive reactive armour package. The T-72 is a great tank, but there's only one Chieftain for me. This thing is amazing. The armour on this thing is ridiculous. The actual thickness of the upper glacis on this thing was actually only 120mm, but it sloped back so heavily. Look at that. It's actually effective 388mm of armour. That's 15.3 inches. It's ridiculous. The lower glacis, yeah, you're going to have problems if people shoot you there. The turret, it actually it didn't have a gun mantlet. And they did this on purpose, because it meant that in a hold down position, inclined backwards, you could actually get 10 degrees of gun depression with this thing. Hold down, you were going to need a tactical thermonuclear warhead to take one of these things out, because that turret was 190mm of basic armour thickness, but it was also sloped at 60 degrees, and there were practically no flat surfaces for you to strike. It was all rounded. The gun was amazing. Most powerful main battle tank gun in the world when it was introduced. Two basic ammunition choices: high explosive squash head, because the British loved their hesh, and armour piercing discarding sabot. It wasn't without its disadvantages, however. The side armour was only around 53mm thick. If you get shot in the side or the rear, you're in a world of trouble if you're in a Chieftain. And it wasn't particularly mobile, and you can see this in Armoured Warfare, that the Chieftain is actually pretty quick in a straight line if you give it a bit of time to get up to full speed, but the second you start turning this tank, it slows down dramatically, and you definitely feel that in game. But the biggest problem with the Chieftain, which is something we'll talk about after I finish shooting up this leopard, unfortunately I've got the wrong I really should be firing hesh at that guy. He only has about 53mm of effective armour. Armour piercing is just far too powerful. But there's a BMD-1 just popped out, and that guy has a guided missile launcher. Yep, there it is. And, well, no critical damage, but I lost some health. But anyway, yeah, the main issue that the Chieftain had was that it just wasn't very reliable, and that was thanks to the British Leyland engine. The engine suffered from just being a little bit too ambitious. It was a multi-fuel engine. It was designed to use whatever fuel was available. They reasoned that if the Cold War ever turned hot, then they weren't going to be able to guarantee... Oh, watch this ricochet. Yes, they reasoned that if the Cold War ever turned hot, they weren't going to be able to guarantee fuel supplies to tanks fighting in Central Europe. And so the engine was designed to run on whatever fuel was available, which was a great idea. Unfortunately, it just wasn't very good. Thankfully, that sort of thing isn't modelled in-game. If it was, and if the Chieftain in the game had the same kind of availability rate that the British Army of the Rhine managed to maintain during the Cold War, then you'd load up your Chieftain, hit the battle button, and only actually be able to move the tank 35% of the time. That's how unreliable this machine was. Before I close in and finish off this Leopard, take a look at... There's a little feature here that certainly, if it was there in the first focus test, I didn't notice it. And it does look like a sort of placeholder graphic, but have a look at the red arrow flashing on screen. Just in the top... There we go, killed the Leopard. Just in the top right corner of my tank schematic, down there in the bottom left corner of the screen, you can see a little picture of the tank with a little white bar next to it. And that little white bar is actually indicating the effectiveness of my camo. It's my visibility meter. As you do things like move the tank and fire the gun, and, you know, obvious things like that, they're a perfect example. As soon as I stopped the tank, the bar filled up. As soon as I fired the gun, the bar practically disappeared again. And there again, I've stopped moving, I start moving, I stop moving, I start moving, and that little meter keeps filling up and emptying as the visibility factor of the tank changes. So that's a nice little new feature, or if it's not a new feature, I certainly didn't notice it the first time around. Now, I did notice an M60E3 popping up behind me. Now that is another Tier 5 tank, obviously American. If he's fully upgraded that tank, he has an explosive reactive armour package, which means I am definitely not going to be firing Hesh at that guy. Not that I've bothered firing Hesh at anybody yet, but ammunition types like high explosive anti-tank, Hesh, heat, any kind of shaped or hollow charge ammunition is just not going to have any kind of effect if it hits explosive reactive armour. So if that M60 comes around the corner with his face pointing towards me, my armour-piercing discarding Sabo is... well, if he's going to give me the side of the tank, okay, fair enough. The APDS ammo is still affected when it hits explosive reactive armour. It's just not affected as much as hollow and shaped charge. And is he really giving me the arse of it? He is in fact giving me the arse of his tank. Well, I would say surprise but sex, but there was nothing surprising about that. I don't know. Maybe he just got excited. Anyway, I've lost a crewman, so use the first aid kit, get them back up. And it took me a while to notice that my gun has actually been hit, although it doesn't really seem to have affected the accuracy too much. Then again, I have been engaging targets at all but point-blank range. And the tank has definitely... I mean, it was getting shot at by some powerful guns. That was a Leopard 1, an M60E3. Got hit by an anti-tank guided missile, and it seems to have weathered the storm quite well. One thing that I have noticed, and again, it's alpha, not surprising at all that when I was shooting at the Leopard, for example, with the APDS ammunition, that it was saying overmatched, overpenetrated. Of course it's overmatched, of course it's overpenetrated. It's not a heavily armoured tank, and it's a very high penetration ammunition. But I did come across a situation where I managed to get behind another Chieftain Mark V and pumped a shot right into his engine block, and it told me overpenetrated, which seemed a little strange because, okay, I expect to overpenetrate the rear armour, but then the shot has to go through the engine block, the rest of the tank, and then has to get through that effective 15.3 inches of frontal armour. So I suspect that was certainly a bug, but not so much a bug in the mechanics as a bug in the message that was reporting what was happening when the shell had hit the target. So that's a little something for Obsidian to look into. I think I got a lot more value out of this second focus test than the first one, because this time around I got to see a lot more of what's going to make this game different from the competition. And it's important when you're developing a game like this that you have to walk a very fine line between making your game familiar to existing users of the genre and avoiding just making a carbon copy of whatever your competition is. And we're pretty much talking about World of Tanks here. So the trick is making your game familiar enough to World of Tanks players that they don't need to sit through an hour-long tutorial in order to figure out how to play your game. But at the same time, you have to give them something different beyond the obvious modern tank thing Otherwise it's just World of Tanks with new tank skins. And so in that respect, being able to have a look at the first iteration of the basic weapons dealer system and the basic commander and crew system was very, very useful. And of course, that's just the tip of the iceberg, because Armoured Warfare is of course going to feature a full-blown PvE content as well. Sadly, no ETA yet of when we can expect to be able to get our hands on that, and I'm not expecting it in the third iteration of the focus test. I think it's still quite a way off, but that's something I'm very, very excited about and definitely looking forward to. So overall, Armoured Warfare second focus test was a lot of fun. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope it's answered some of your questions about what you can expect to see when this thing finally goes into closed and then open beta test. As always folks, take care, and I'll catch you next time.